My name is Ree Lawson, 34 years old. The phone rang at 2 a.m. My sister's name flashed on the screen, and a cold, instinctive fear curled in my stomach. When I picked up, her voice was a frayed thread of panic. Ree, he's here. He's breaking everything. I locked myself and Ivy in the bathroom, but he's... Her sobs choked off the rest of her words. I shook Garrett awake, the urgency slicing through the fog of sleep. We need to go get her now. Garrett barely stirred, groaning in frustration. He rolled over, barely opening his eyes. Your family drama isn't my problem, Ree. Handle it yourself. His words hit me like a slap. 6 years of marriage, 6 years of giving everything, my time, my energy, my love. And this was what I got. My sister, my family, in crisis, and Garrett was too tired, too indifferent to care. I didn't wait. I grabbed my keys, slipped on shoes, and drove through the dark streets alone. The world outside my car was still, but inside everything was unraveling. How had I gotten here? How had I let my marriage get this far? When I reached my sister's house, the door was cracked open, and the room inside was a wreck. Furniture overturned, glass shattered, but worst of all, my sister was crouched in the corner of the bathroom, her 2-year-old daughter curled against her side. Blood dripped from a gash on her arm, a wound I knew would be harder to heal than anything physical. The police arrived shortly after I did, their presence almost too calm in contrast to the chaos. Statements. Sirens. My sister's voice still trembling as she recounted the events through jagged breaths. Garrett's absence, the lack of any support from him, gnawed at me, but I couldn't dwell on it then. I had to keep moving. Back at home, my sister and Ivy moved into our guest room. Garrett didn't acknowledge them when he came down to the kitchen the next morning, but I could feel the weight of his silence. Every slam of a cabinet, every subtle roll of his eyes when Ivy cried, was a reminder of how much he resented them being there. I watched him, the way he avoided my sister's eyes, the way his anger flared at the smallest noise. At first, I chalked it up to stress, but the longer I observed, the more I saw. There were moments, small moments, but significant enough to make my skin crawl. His phone always locked, always password protected. Evenings when he'd rush out for meetings, spritzing cologne before leaving, telling me it was just work. And then the charges for the hotels. The golf weekends I was supposed to believe were innocent, but were now tainted with the scent of something far darker. But it was more than just his distance, more than just his attitude toward my family. It was the moment he said, she probably provoked him. The words hit harder than I expected. She probably provoked him. The disbelief nearly paralyzed me. Was this the man I'd spent 6 years of my life with? The man who'd pretended to care, who'd shown up when his mother needed cancer treatments, when his cousin lost his job, when his father's business failed. And yet now, in this moment, he could not find it in himself to help my sister, my family, when they were in mortal danger? I stopped confronting him. Instead, I documented everything. Conversations, hotel charges, meetings that didn't add up. Slowly, the web of lies began to unravel. But it wasn't just what he did, it was who he had become. The man I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone cold and calculating. Then the call came. Garrett's brother, Nolan, had been arrested for embezzling $400,000 from his company's pension fund. He needed bail, a lawyer, and a place to hide from reporters. Garrett was frantic. We have to help him, he pleaded. I stared at him. He's family, he insisted. I didn't speak at first. I sipped my coffee and let the weight of the question sink in. Family. What did that even mean anymore? I didn't need to say it. I simply repeated the words he had once said to me. Your family drama isn't my problem. His face went white. He leaned forward, eyes desperate. You can't be serious. He's facing prison. And my sister was facing death, I shot back. Her kid is traumatized. That's not the same thing, Garrett. He begged. For 2 days straight, he called me heartless, selfish, vindictive. His emotions were frenzied, raw, but only when it came to Nolan. Not once did he beg for my sister. I stayed firm. I refused. And then, as if to cement my decision, I found the email. It wasn't about the affair, though I had my suspicions. It was the joint investment account, a shadowy place where Garrett had been siphoning money from our retirement savings, the same account Nolan had used to fund his embezzlement scheme. I couldn't ignore it. I forwarded everything to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, not yet knowing the depths of the situation. But then, as if in a final act of betrayal, I discovered something worse. My mortgage. The house I thought we were paying off, Garrett had refinanced without my knowledge, and worse still, he had forged my signature to do it. The house that had once been my grandmother's, my only piece of family history, was now leveraged to fund their criminal enterprise. That evening, when Garrett came home, I served him the divorce papers with his dinner. He didn't fight me at first. He couldn't. His gaze dropped to the table and then to the papers, and in that moment, I knew that he realized he was no longer in control of anything. But then his fury flared. "You can't do this, Ree. You don't understand what you're doing. I need you. We need you." I didn't say anything. I simply stood, walked out of the room, and let the sound of the papers flapping in the still air be the last thing he heard. The days that followed were a blur. I moved my sister and niece into my grandmother's house that night, the place I was desperately fighting to keep, though it now felt like an anchor dragging me down. Garrett's protests echoed through the house, his irritation rising as I rearranged everything to make room for them. But what bothered him more than the noise was the intrusion, the reminder that my family was here, that his indifference to their suffering could no longer be ignored. For 3 weeks, I watched Garrett's treatment of my sister and Ivy. The strained silence whenever they entered a room, the way his shoulders tensed when Ivy's innocent laughter broke through the quiet. It was suffocating. He made no effort to hide his resentment. Every slam of the cabinet, every sharp word aimed at me when I spoke in defense of my sister, only reinforced the gulf between us. He didn't even try to pretend it was about anything other than his own discomfort, his own inconvenience. And then it happened. His phone was left unlocked one evening. I should have ignored it, should have walked away, but I didn't. Instead, I opened the messages, scrolling through them with a sick sense of inevitability. There, in black and white, were hotel receipts from weekends he swore were spent on golf trips. But these weren't from golf resorts. They were from business hotels in places I didn't recognize, cities I'd never heard him mention. I felt the familiar pang of betrayal, a sharp ache in my chest. But the more I looked, the deeper I dug into his lies, the more I uncovered. There were strange meetings that never lined up with the calendar he'd kept. Things he'd told me were nothing, but never explained. And the passwords. Passwords for everything. His phone, his email. Even our joint bank accounts were locked behind a wall I could never break through. It wasn't until I found the email that everything clicked together. It wasn't an affair, although that was the next step in the puzzle. It was worse. Far worse. A joint investment account. One that Garrett had set up without telling me. One that he'd funded with money he had siphoned from our retirement account, without my knowledge or consent. That money had been going somewhere it shouldn't have. And Nolan, Garrett's brother, the one who was now embroiled in a criminal mess, had been involved in it too. I forwarded the email to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. It felt like a betrayal of its own, but at the same time, it was the only thing left to do. The depth of the deception became clearer every minute. Garrett wasn't just indifferent to my family's needs, he was actively hiding his own illegal actions from me, jeopardizing everything we'd built together. The next morning, I woke up to a knock at the door. A letter, hand-delivered, detailing the foreclosure process on our home. The one we had been paying on for years, but apparently had not. Not with Garrett's refinancing. He had forged my signature to leverage the property, my grandmother's house, my only tie to the past, for something far darker. He had done this to us. I couldn't breathe. The anger coursed through me like a river breaking through its dam, flooding everything in its path. The life I thought I had was a mirage built on lies and theft, and now it was collapsing around me. I didn't just feel betrayed. I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. I took a deep breath, calmed the storm inside, and then, in a quiet moment that seemed to stretch across years, I decided it was time to let him go. I would no longer be complicit in his charade. I would no longer protect him or his lies. I didn't care if he begged. I didn't care if he apologized. I called a lawyer that afternoon, filled out the paperwork for divorce. By the time Garrett came home, I was sitting at the kitchen table with divorce papers in front of me. My hands shook slightly as I slid them across the table to him. "You can't do this," Garrett said, his voice low and full of disbelief. He knew what I had found. He could see it in my eyes. The game was up. "You don't understand what you're doing. I need you. We need you." His voice cracked, and I knew, in that moment, that he was no longer the man I married. He was someone else entirely, someone I couldn't recognize. "I don't need you," I said as my pulse quickened. "I need the truth. I need to know that the family I've been protecting for 6 years actually cared about me. Not just when it was convenient, not when it was a duty. I stood up, walked toward the door, my heart racing. As I left, I heard him scream behind me, but I didn't turn back. The decision had been made. The door slammed behind me, and I knew it was the last time I would ever walk away from him. The silence in the house after Garrett left was deafening. I couldn't escape the weight of the truth, the suffocating realization that everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my family, my future had been a lie. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the divorce papers still lying on the table. It was official now. There was no going back. But it wasn't enough. There was still so much left to uncover, so much I didn't know. I spent the next few days combing through the documents I had gathered, piecing together the fragments of Garrett's lies. Each discovery felt like another stab to the heart. The joint investment account was just the tip of the iceberg. It wasn't just money that had been siphoned from our savings. Garrett had been forging my signature to refinance our home behind my back, and he'd done it without any hesitation. The trust I had placed in him had been a joke, a fragile illusion shattered by the cold, hard facts. Then there was Nolan, the brother Garrett had spent so many sleepless nights defending, the brother who had been arrested for embezzling hundreds of thousands from his own company. Garrett had made excuses for him for years, hidden his mistakes, bailed him out whenever things got messy. But now it was clear. Nolan wasn't the only one who had been stealing. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a systematic dismantling of everything I had worked so hard for. It wasn't just my marriage falling apart. It was my life. Everything I had built, crumbling under the weight of Garrett's deceit. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of an old friend, someone from my past life. Back when I worked in the prosecutor's office, Patricia Chen had always been sharp. But now, she was more than that. She was my lifeline. She listened carefully as I explained the situation, her silence at the other end of the line telling me that she understood the gravity of it all. "You've got a strong case here," Patricia said. Her voice measured, but the anger simmering just beneath the surface was palpable. "This is fraud, obstruction of justice, and you're right. Your husband is involved in something far bigger than just an affair. We need to go to the FBI. They're already looking into his brother's embezzlement. This is bigger than you think." The realization hit me hard. This wasn't just a marital dispute. This was a criminal enterprise, and Garrett had been playing a part in it. But Patricia was right. I couldn't keep going alone. I needed the FBI to help me untangle this web, to expose Garrett for what he was. But more than that, I needed to take control back. This wasn't just about the money. It was about my life, my agency, my future. I needed to take Garrett down, not just for what he had done to me, but for what he had done to so many others. When I showed Patricia the bank statements, the hotel receipts, the email between Garrett and Nolan, she grew more furious with each passing page. "This is textbook financial crime," she said, her voice low. "But it's more than that. Garrett's actions have endangered your safety, your financial future, your family. He's crossed a line that has real consequences." And then there was the mortgage, the house I thought we were paying off. That had been a lie, too. He had refinanced it without my knowledge, without my consent. And the worst part? He had forged my signature to do it. The house that my grandmother had left me, the house that had always been a symbol of stability and love, was now a pawn in Garrett's game. I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive myself for not seeing it sooner, but I knew one thing for sure. Garrett wasn't going to get away with it. The moment I called the FBI was the moment I took my life back. There was no turning back after that. I was in it now, deep. And I wasn't going to let Garrett drag me down with him. The investigation was slow at first, but the deeper I dug, the more I realized how much Garrett had hidden from me. The affair was just the beginning. He had been siphoning off our savings for months, funneling money into an account that no one knew about. He had lied about where the money was going, lied about his time spent away, lied about everything. The man I thought I married was gone, and in his place was a stranger who had manipulated and deceived me for years. But the worst part was the way he had tried to manipulate my family. My sister, my only real support, had been left vulnerable. She had needed me, and Garrett had turned his back on her. But he hadn't just abandoned her. He had treated her like an inconvenience, like a burden he didn't want to bear. And when I started uncovering everything, when I started putting the pieces together, it became clear that this was never about family. It was about control. It was about power. Garrett didn't just want to be my husband. He wanted to own me, own my family, own everything I had worked so hard to build. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Not this time. The weight of the truth settled heavily on my shoulders. Each day, it felt like the walls were closing in, and I had no choice but to keep pushing forward. Every time I thought I was getting closer to the end, something else would surface. A new revelation, another lie, another betrayal that cut deeper than the last. But I kept going because I had no other choice. My sister needed me. Ivy needed me. And, in a way, I needed me too. The FBI's involvement was a game changer. They were taking Garrett's financial crimes seriously, and Patricia helped me connect with Special Agent Morrison, who had been investigating Nolan's embezzlement for months. Morrison was everything I wasn't: cool-headed, methodical, and unflappable in the face of Garrett's wealth of lies. But the deeper we dug, the more we realized that Garrett wasn't just hiding a few stolen dollars. He was involved in something far bigger, and it was only a matter of time before the authorities would catch up with him. In the meantime, Garrett's behavior grew more erratic. He stopped trying to hide his frustration, and I watched as the mask of the devoted husband slipped, revealing someone I hardly recognized. He was still the same man who had promised me the world, but now his promises felt empty, hollow. He started threatening me in more subtle ways. He would slam doors when I was in the room, mutter insults under his breath, and give me looks that made my stomach turn. But it wasn't until the incident with my tires that I knew we had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. I woke up one morning to find my car's tires slashed, the jagged marks on the rubber unmistakable. The sound of a blade tearing through metal and rubber echoed in my mind as I stared at the damage. I knew who had done it. I knew it had to be him. I didn't confront him. Instead, I grabbed my phone and checked the security footage. The footage was grainy, but I could clearly see the outline of a hooded figure moving around my car. The walk was unmistakable, the same gait I had seen thousands of times before. Garrett had done this. He was sending me a message, one that said, "You're mine. You belong to me." I knew then that I wasn't just dealing with a man who had made a few bad choices. I was dealing with a man who was willing to destroy everything, and everyone, just to cover his own mistakes. He would stop at nothing to protect himself, even if it meant hurting me, hurting my family. That afternoon, I called the FBI again. Morrison was quick to respond. "We need to move fast," he said. "We've got a solid case, but the more time we give him, the more dangerous he becomes." I agreed. We needed to act before Garrett realized how deep he was in. But there was a problem. He was already on to me. He'd figured out that I was working with the authorities. I could see it in his eyes, the way he watched me when I came home. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. He wasn't just angry anymore. He was desperate. That's when Morrison gave me the plan. "We need someone on the inside," he said. "Someone Garrett trusts, someone he won't suspect." It was risky, dangerous even, but I was willing to do whatever it took to end this, to make sure Garrett's actions didn't ruin any more lives. I had a decision to make, and I made it. The plan was simple but terrifying. I would meet Garrett at a local coffee shop, wearing a wire, and try to get him to confess. I would lead him into a conversation about the embezzlement scheme, the money, the people they owed, and hopefully, I would get him to talk about Nolan's involvement. I knew it was a gamble, but it was the only chance we had to nail him. My sister begged me not to do it. "What if something goes wrong?" she asked, pacing the kitchen. "What if they hurt you?" "Then they hurt me," I said, trying to calm her down. "But at least you and Ivy will be safe. That's all that matters." She wasn't convinced, but she knew I had made up my mind. I had to do this. For her, for Ivy, for everyone Garrett had hurt. The meeting was set. I was a bundle of nerves, every part of me screaming to back out, to walk away, to let someone else handle it. But as I stepped into the coffee shop where Garrett and I had shared our first date, all of those doubts melted away. Garrett was already sitting at a table, his back to the window, the same posture he always had when we'd met here years ago. The man who had once seemed so full of promise now looked haggard, defeated. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was fidgeting with his coffee cup, as if the weight of his own lies had finally caught up with him. I sat down across from him, careful to keep my hands still, my face neutral. I could feel the wire in my shirt, pressing uncomfortably against my skin. I had to stay calm. I had to act like nothing was wrong. "Thank you for coming," Garrett said, his voice rough, like he hadn't slept in days. I didn't know who else to turn to. I didn't answer. I just stared at him, waiting for him to continue. "I know I've made mistakes," he said, his eyes pleading with me. I I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't mean to hurt you, but you have to understand. I was just trying to protect us. I thought I could fix everything. I wanted to scream at him, to throw the truth in his face, but I stayed silent, waiting for him to dig deeper. It started small, he continued, looking at his hands. I got involved with Nolan's investment. He said it was safe. He said we could double our money, no problem. But then it got out of control. The more we invested, the more we owed, and I didn't know how to stop it. So I just kept digging, kept lying to you, kept hiding everything. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could make it all right. I could feel the blood rushing to my face, the rage boiling inside me. I had to keep my cool. And the money? I asked, voice steady, but my heart hammering in my chest. Where did the money go, Garrett? His eyes flickered. I didn't want to hurt you, he said again, this time almost pleading. I thought I could fix it. I thought if I could just make enough money, I could pay everything back before you noticed. I leaned in, lowering my voice. You thought you could fix everything by stealing from me? By forging my signature? By putting my family's future at risk? He froze. Then, his face twisted in rage. You don't understand, he hissed, lunging across the table and grabbing me by the collar. The coffee cup shattered as he knocked it to the floor. People around us gasped and scrambled to get away, but I didn't move. I just stared at him, waiting. He was losing control, and I had what I needed. 2 agents materialized from the counter, pulling him off me. Morrison was one of them, his eyes sharp as he helped me stand. We got everything we needed, he said quietly. But I didn't feel relief. I felt hollow. I had done what needed to be done, but in that moment, I realized the depth of what I had lost. Not just Garrett, but the person I thought I had been, the woman who believed in family, in loyalty, in love. That woman was gone. The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of legal paperwork, endless meetings, and the quiet hum of the world moving forward without any regard for the chaos that had just erupted in my life. Garrett's arrest was the beginning of a slow, painful unraveling. Every morning, I checked the news, praying for some sense of finality, but each new headline, each new report only seemed to dig the hole deeper. I had made the decision. I had taken the steps to expose Garrett for what he was, to pull him out of the shadows and into the light where his lies could no longer thrive. But now, as the investigation continued, I realized something. The battle wasn't just with Garrett. It wasn't just with Nolan or his criminal enterprise. It was with myself. The guilt that had been buried for so long, the feelings of betrayal that still haunted me, had nowhere left to hide. But I had made peace with it. I wasn't going to let the past define me. The truth had come to light, and now there was nothing left to do but watch Garrett face the consequences of his actions. When the trial date came, I was ready. Or at least, I thought I was. Garrett sat across from me in the courtroom, his eyes dark and hollow, his once imposing figure now broken and defeated. The man I had once known was gone, replaced by someone who had been exposed for his true nature. The lies, the deceit, the manipulation, all of it had come crashing down, and there was no escaping it anymore. I didn't speak during the trial. I didn't need to. The evidence was overwhelming. But when the moment came for the prosecutor to ask for my victim's statement, I stood up. It wasn't for Garrett. It wasn't even for the jury. It was for me. It was time to finally let go of the person I had been holding on to, the woman who had sacrificed everything for a marriage that was never real. I used to believe that love meant sacrifice, I said, my voice steady despite the storm that raged inside me. I believed that loyalty meant blind devotion. That family came first, no matter what. But what I've learned is that love without respect is just a lie, and sacrifice without reciprocity is nothing more than self-destruction. I paused, my gaze locking with Garrett's, for the first time since the trial began. His eyes were filled with something, regret, maybe. But it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't there to make him feel better. I spent years giving you everything I had while you slowly destroyed everything I was. You used me, you lied to me, and you tore my family apart. But that's not who I am anymore. You don't get to define me. You don't get to break me. I felt the room shift as my words settled in the air. For the first time in a long time, I felt strong, stronger than I had ever felt in my life. The verdict was inevitable. Garrett was convicted on all charges: mortgage fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Nolan's charges were stacked on top, a devastating blow to their criminal operation. Both men were sentenced to lengthy prison terms, but as I walked out of the courtroom, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a quiet, unshakable sense of finality. In the weeks that followed, things slowly started to shift. My sister and Ivy continued to heal. My niece no longer flinched at loud noises or sudden movements. My sister enrolled in night classes, determined to build a future of her own. And me? I started to rebuild my life from the ground up. I took a job at a nonprofit, using my legal background to help others escape the same kind of toxic relationships I had endured. Every day, I helped someone else find their voice, and in doing so, I found more pieces of myself. But it wasn't just about the work. It was about healing, about moving forward with my head held high, no longer haunted by the past. And then, one night, I received a call from my lawyer. The settlement check for the embezzled funds had finally come through. 6 figures. Money I didn't want, money I didn't need, but money that would give me the freedom to help others. I had a decision to make. I could take the money and walk away, put it behind me, or I could do something bigger, something meaningful. I called Patricia, and the answer became clear. "We need to fund a legal clinic," I said to her the next morning, my voice firm. "A place where people like my sister, and like me, can get the support they need. No strings attached. Just a safe place to start over." Patricia's response was immediate. "How much are we talking about?" she asked. "Enough to change lives," I told her. And we did. The Lawson Legal Clinic opened 6 months later, housed in a renovated historic building downtown. The work we did there, providing legal representation to survivors of abuse, helping them break free from toxic relationships, was the beginning of something incredible. And as I stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, surrounded by survivors and advocates, I realized something profound. I had finally broken the cycle. Garrett's destruction had led to this moment, to the birth of something beautiful, something that would continue long after he was gone. My past had shaped me, but it didn't define me. I had learned that love was about respect and trust, not control or manipulation. And I had built something that could help others do the same. It was a sunny afternoon when the ribbon was cut on the Lawson Legal Clinic, but I hardly noticed the warm rays or the bustling crowd. All I could focus on was the realization that the life I'd worked so hard to build had come full circle. From the destruction of my marriage to the healing of my own heart, this clinic was more than just a building. It was the physical manifestation of everything I had fought for. The clinic became a sanctuary for survivors, a place where women and men could find the courage to rebuild their lives. It was more than legal aid. It was support, guidance, and a community that said, "You are not alone." The work was tough, but every time we helped someone leave an abusive situation, I felt that old wound inside me begin to heal just a little more. My sister was my rock through all of this. She enrolled in night classes, working toward her associate degree, and I couldn't have been prouder. I had seen her go from a woman in fear for her life to a fierce, independent force in her own right. We would sit together at night, talking about our plans for the future, discussing our hopes for Ivy, who was growing up with more confidence than I ever could have imagined. Ivy was thriving too, no longer flinching at loud noises or hiding behind her mother's legs. Her smile was bright and full of promise, and when she ran to us at the end of the day, her backpack bouncing against her tiny shoulders, I couldn't help but think that, despite all we'd been through, we had given her a life filled with love and safety. But the journey wasn't over. As the clinic gained traction and became a beacon for others, the echoes of my past still lingered. There were days when I woke up with the tightness in my chest, that residual anxiety that came from a decade of living under Garrett's control. There were nights when I would lie awake, heart racing, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the next step would be my last. One evening, as I was leaving the clinic, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but something about it, something in my gut, told me to pick up. "Is this Mrs. Lawson?" The voice was unfamiliar but clipped. My pulse quickened. "Yes, it is. Who's this?" I asked cautiously. "My name is Vincent Hardy," the voice continued. "I am calling about Garrett Lawson." My heart sank. What could he possibly want after everything that had happened? "Garrett's been involved in a car accident. He's in critical condition. The hospital is asking if you'd like to make decisions on his care. He listed you as his emergency contact." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the air in the room thin, the walls around me closing in. For a moment, I was paralyzed. Garrett was in a hospital, and he had listed me as his emergency contact. After everything, after all the lies, after the divorce. Why? No, I said firmly, my voice steady. I'm not responsible for him anymore. The man hesitated. Are you sure, Mrs. Lawson? The doctors are asking for someone to make decisions regarding his medical care. If you're listed as his contact. I don't care, I interrupted. I'm done. I hung up before he could say another word. I felt nothing in that moment. No relief, no anger, just a quiet certainty. Garrett's fate was no longer my problem. I had built something from the ashes of my pain, something real and good, and I was no longer tethered to his toxic grip. The chapter of my life with him had closed, and it wasn't my responsibility to carry his burden any longer. The next few days were quiet, almost surreal. The life I had worked so hard to rebuild, the family we were creating, felt like a dream. I went to work, met with clients, and supported my sister and Ivy. But there was one final piece of unfinished business, something I didn't know if I was ready for. I called Patricia, my lawyer, and asked her to track down the final settlement from Garrett's assets, the funds that had been hidden for so long. When the check arrived, 6 figures strong, I couldn't bring myself to cash it. It felt wrong, like accepting blood money, and yet it wasn't just about the money. It was about what it represented, the last of Garrett's betrayal and the last vestige of his control over me. Instead, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Patricia again, and this time I told her what I wanted to do. I want to use this money, I said, my voice firm, but not for me. I want to use it to build something that can help others. I want to create a legal clinic, a place for victims to come, to fight back, and to reclaim their lives. Patricia didn't hesitate. You'll need a board of directors, a team of lawyers, but we can make it happen. And so we did. The Lawson Legal Clinic was born out of the wreckage of my past, built with the funds I never wanted, but now, using them to bring justice to others felt like the only thing that made sense. The clinic became a place of hope for those who thought they had nowhere to turn, a lifeline for those still trapped in the cycles of abuse and manipulation I had once known so well. As the years went on, I watched the clinic grow, watched survivors walk through the doors and walk out with new lives. My sister, having earned her degree, became an integral part of the clinic's work, offering support to others who were where we once were, and Ivy, growing up stronger every day, was learning to advocate for herself, to believe in her own worth. But the final shift came when I looked back at the life I had rebuilt. I had always thought the worst thing that could happen was losing Garrett, but I had learned something far more valuable, that sometimes the worst thing is staying. It's allowing someone to control your story, to take away your voice. The real victory wasn't in watching him fall. It was in rising above him, in taking back control of my life and my future. And that was the real power. The years that followed Garrett's arrest and everything that came after felt like a slow, deliberate healing. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't without its setbacks and moments of doubt. But as the clinic grew and became a beacon of hope for others, I realized something powerful. The life I had lost, the life Garrett had taken from me, was nothing compared to what I had built in its place. There were days when the weight of the past would hit me unexpectedly, driving past our old house, hearing a song that reminded me of our wedding, or catching sight of a couple walking hand in hand. Those moments were hard, but they were fleeting. I had spent too many years of my life hanging on to a version of myself that no longer existed. I had fought so hard to make my marriage work, to make my family work, but in the end, the thing I had needed most was to let go of the broken pieces and start over. I had to let go of the woman who kept forgiving, who kept making excuses, who kept sacrificing herself for someone who never cared enough to return the favor. And once I did that, I began to see the beauty in the pieces I had put back together. I sat on my back porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, when I got a text from Ivy. Ivy, Mom, I want to talk to you about something. It's important. I felt a rush of worry before I remembered. Ivy was no longer the scared little girl who had flinched at every loud noise. She had grown into a smart, confident young woman who knew her worth. I called her immediately. What's up, honey? There was a pause on the other end before she spoke. I just wanted to say thank you for everything, for showing me that it's okay to be strong, to stand up for myself, and that I don't have to be afraid of the future. I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and I realized I'm not scared anymore. I'm ready for whatever comes next. I smiled through the tears that welled in my eyes. Ivy had always been my hope, my reason for fighting. To hear her speak those words, to know she had found her own strength, it felt like a full circle moment. "You're ready, Ivy," I said softly. "You've always been ready, and I'm so proud of you." As I ended the call, I realized just how much I had grown. I wasn't the same woman who had spent years waiting for someone else's approval, looking for validation in all the wrong places. I had learned that strength wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving. It was about stepping into your power and refusing to let anyone take that from you. The days after that conversation with Ivy felt lighter, almost as if I had shed another layer of the past. The clinic continued to thrive, helping more and more families each month. The community we built wasn't just one of survivors, it was one of advocates, of warriors who were willing to fight for their own lives and the lives of those they loved. My sister, too, had come a long way. She had completed her degree, working at the clinic alongside me, helping others who were just beginning their journey. We spent countless hours together, planning, strategizing, and fighting for justice. And even Garrett's mother, the woman who had once sided with him, had become a part of the healing process. She had put aside her bitterness and guilt and started volunteering at the clinic, doing the hard work of reconciling with herself, with her son's victims, and with the truth of the damage he had caused. It was a small step toward redemption, but it was something. One afternoon, as I sat in the clinic's quiet office looking over a case file, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was familiar, but unexpected. "Ree," Garrett's mother said softly. I wanted to let you know that he's been transferred to a new facility. I'm not sure how much time he has left, but I thought you should know." For a moment, I froze. The woman I had once thought of as an enemy was now asking for my understanding. "I don't want anything from you, Mrs. Lawson," I said after a pause, "and I don't know what to say about Garrett. I'm sorry for what you're going through, but I can't be part of it." "I understand," she replied, her voice small, broken. "I just wanted to thank you for being the better person, for choosing to move forward. I wish I had done the same." She hung up, and I sat there for a long while. Garrett's story was over for me. It had ended a long time ago, the moment I walked away from him. But his mother's call, it was a reminder that there were no simple answers, no clean conclusions. People made mistakes. They hurt others. But sometimes they learned. And sometimes the ones who learned the most were the ones who had to endure the deepest pain. I took a deep breath and placed the phone back in its cradle. It was a reminder to me that healing wasn't always linear. We didn't just get over the past. We learned to live with it, and we made something better from it. The phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Patricia. "Patricia, we've secured another grant. The clinic is expanding to 3 new locations." I smiled, typing back. This is just the beginning. It felt like everything had led me here, to this moment of peace, of knowing that I had not only survived, but had turned my pain into something meaningful. Something that could help others find their strength, their courage, their voice. It had been several years since that day, and the weight of everything, the betrayal, the fight for justice, the loss, and the rebuilding, had finally settled into something I could live with. The Lawson Legal Clinic had expanded far beyond what I had ever imagined. What started as a place to help people escape toxic relationships and fight back against abuse had become a true haven for survivors. It was no longer just a clinic, it was a community. And as I walked through the hallways, seeing the faces of people we had helped, people who had rebuilt their lives, who were now standing on their own 2 feet, I knew that I had done something bigger than myself. The work wasn't easy. It wasn't always clean or straightforward, but it was important. It mattered. It was changing lives every day, and every time I sat down with a new client, I saw a little bit of myself in them. They were scared, uncertain, and had no idea how to move forward. But they had taken the first step, and that was enough. That's what I had done years ago, taken the first step into the unknown, into my future, into my own power. But even though the clinic thrived, there was still one piece left of my past that had not been addressed, something I'd been avoiding. My own healing. There had been moments where I'd felt whole again, working at the clinic, seeing my sister succeed, watching Ivy grow up into the confident young woman she had become. But there were still days when the pain of the past would sneak up on me, times when I'd remember Garrett's cold indifference, or the way he had turned his back on my family. There were nights when I would wake up feeling the familiar tension in my chest, that tight, anxious knot that I couldn't seem to shake. And that was when I realized something important. Healing wasn't about forgetting. It wasn't about erasing the past or pretending that the hurt never happened. It was about acceptance, acknowledging the wounds, accepting the scars, and choosing to move forward anyway. It wasn't easy. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. But I had learned the power of resilience. I had learned that peace doesn't come from erasing the past. It comes from learning how to live with it. It was on one of those quiet evenings, as I sat in my office, looking over case files and thinking about everything I had built, that I received a text from my sister. "We're celebrating Ivy's graduation this weekend. Want to come?" I smiled at the message. Ivy's graduation was a huge milestone, not just for her, but for all of us. She had grown so much, and I couldn't wait to see where life would take her. Of course, wouldn't miss it for the world. The next few days were a blur of excitement. Ivy had worked so hard to get to this point, and as I watched her walk across the stage, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride and gratitude. We had come so far from where we had started, lost, broken, scared, and now we were here, together, stronger than ever. After the ceremony, we all gathered in the backyard of my grandmother's house, the same place where we had fought to keep the house all those years ago. The roses she had planted were in full bloom, their fragrance sweet in the warm summer air. We laughed, shared stories, and celebrated Ivy's success. My sister had made her famous lasagna, and we ate until we couldn't eat anymore. Ivy talked excitedly about her future, college, travel, the dreams she had been nurturing for years. I couldn't have been prouder. At the end of the night, after most of the guests had left, Ivy came up to me, her face glowing with happiness. She had her graduation cap in hand, and her eyes sparkled with excitement about what was to come. "Thank you, Aunt Ree," she said softly, her voice full of gratitude, "for everything you've done for me, for everything you've taught me. I wouldn't be here without you." My heart swelled with love for her. "You'd be here, Ivy, with or without me. You're strong, smart, and capable. You've always had it in you." She hugged me tight, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like all the pieces of my life were finally in place. I had healed, I had forgiven myself, and I had built a life that was rooted in love, not fear. Later that night, after everyone had left, I sat alone in my grandmother's garden, surrounded by the soft glow of fairy lights strung along the fence. The breeze was cool, and the roses rustled softly in the wind. I thought about everything, about the pain, the betrayal, the struggle, but also about the love and the strength that had come from it. I wasn't the same woman who had cried in the dark, waiting for Garrett to love me back. I wasn't the same woman who had felt worthless and invisible in my own marriage. I had been through hell, but I had come out stronger, braver, and more at peace than I had ever imagined possible. And as I sat there, surrounded by the love of my family, I realized that I had finally found what I had been searching for all along: peace. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living.